My name is Sidney R. Rouse, and I served in the Navy for 4 years and in the National Guard 2 years, predominantly on water. It was the USS Cabildo. We started out in the Marshall Islands, and we hauled a whole bunch of small boats like LCVPs and LCMs and whatnot out to Eniwetok. And we were there for about a year and a half, and we tested 4 atomic bombs. They called that greenhouse program. The small boats went and facilitated the islands as they had all the civilians and the scientists set up the islands for testing. Well, they needed boats to get out to the islands, and we the mothership for all the boats. The crew, if I remember right, is about 250.
Was it a mix of men and women?
No, there wasn't a single woman aboard ship.
I see. Now,
That was back in the 50s, and they didn't have very many women in the service back then. The first story was there at Eniwetok. It was the first radioactive ship. And when we did get back from Eniwetok, we were sent up to Stockton, California, and we were quarantined for 3 weeks up there while they cleaned the ship up and decontaminated it. The atomic blast gives off radiation and radioactive particles. Well, the radiation, that's gone within seconds. But the radioactive particles, which is alpha particles, they're like dust, and they keep falling for days, and they'll land on you like dust, and you go through the decontamination station and you're radioactive, and washing and showering helps delete some of that radioactive material. And then naturally the ship is falling all over the ship, and we had fire hoses spraying the ship down all over the ship that washed the contamination off the ship and down the scuppers and down into the water, and that reduced the radioactive signal of the ship itself. I had a lead man, and we were 2 guinea pigs that were sent out during the fallout. Everybody else was down below decks, and we had to change all the bulbs on the outside of the ship. The running lights, the signal lights, the tail light, the bow light, both guides, reds and green lights on the side. We had to change all those bulbs, and it took us about an hour and a half out during the maximum fallout from the 4 different blasts. So we got the privilege of going through the decontamination station and taking a shower and washing your hair and come back out, and there was no change. He says, go do it again. So we go back in and we scrub a little bit harder and use a little bit more soap, and we come back out pretty proud, we're pretty clean. He says, no, you didn't change enough. You're still hotter than heck. Go back through again. But they gave us, I don't know if anybody will remember, they call it sand soap, and the old kai brush where they scrub the floors with. They gave us that. They said, use this and let's get clean. So by the time our underarms started to bleed and between our legs started to bleed and stuff, we just had enough of it. Wow. And they said, well, when we get down to the blood washing it off, that's gone too far. And We were quarantined for 3 weeks below decks. We couldn't go above decks to absorb any more radiation. And we're on the list of tracking radioactive people in the U.S. government. Outside of that, it was lots of fun. You're standing there, naturally your eyes are covered, and as soon as you're looking at the floor, as soon as you see a bright flash on the floor, we can turn around and look at the explosion. And you're looking at that little bubble on the horizon out there, which was only 7.5 miles away. And that little bubble would start to rise, and then you could see the fire and the heat. And as missiles went through the core to pick up radiation and whatnot, all this is going on, and your mouth kind of drops open, and as it climbs to 20, 30,000 feet in the air, that heat is orange, red, all colors, yellow, going up that column. And then it gets way up above, and then it mushrooms out. And it really mushrooms out. And you're just standing there with your mouth open, looking at this thing, you know. You're not looking at the water. You're just looking at that beautiful colored sight. And here comes along on the top of the water, a ripple doing about 760 miles an hour. And it hits you on the ears, just like somebody standing behind you and cupped their hands and slapped you on the ears. Everybody turned around and looked at each other. What was that? And that was the noise of the bomb going off. It was quite an ordeal. Some guys had to go down below and change their pants, naturally, which I was not one. Later on, they checked my left ear and they found out that it was slightly split. It had been healed back up, and there's a scar tissue on the eardrum.
That's a fascinating experience that so few people in this world will ever have had.
Thank goodness. Well, after we got decontaminated in the States, they loaded us up with 3 great big, I call them gravel barges, loaded plumb full of aircraft engines. And we went back over and dropped off the 3 barges in Incheon Harbor at the landing of Incheon. All these aircraft engines were for the F-80 Superjets that were fighting over there at the time. So they had plenty of spare engines for a while anyway. And then we got sent back to the States, and we picked up Mine 3 Squadron. And they were all small craft, just like at Eniwetok. And yet they were converted into small mine-sweeping boats. And we were sent back over to Korea around the other side and up to Wonsan Harbor, where we sat for about 1.5 years taking care of these mine-sweeping boats. We would go into the harbor and ballast down, and then the small boats would go out and they would clear the edge of the harbor of all the mines that were set out there, because the destroyers and cruisers would go in and knock out all the gun emplacements that they could see in the harbor. And the small boats would cut the mines loose, and they'd bob up, and they would get rid of the mines. Usually they'd detonate them, but some of them find out that they were a different model and whatnot, and come to find out they were American mines, and they'd send them back to Washington, D.C. to get examined and whatnot. And we had to baggage up several of the mines and send them, ship them back out. And one day I was looking down in the well deck of our ship, and the UDT team that was assigned to handle the mines, we had 3 600-pounders, about so big around and about so tall. I got pictures of them. And the guy was down there with a wrench and took the cover off of one mine, and very slowly he took the cover, and here he pulled up a big unit about that long with 3 great big spikes in the end of it, and he held it up, pointed over the side of the ship, and he slapped it. Well, those 3 spikes are still traveling.
And were they
They were
active?
loaded. They were still loaded. Naturally, we really appreciated that, because right above those 3 mines was a hole in our O2 deck, about that big around, where a 8-inch, no, I think they called it a 144 millimeter shell from the shore, landed, point detonating fuse, and just tore our deck wide open and threw shrapnel all over our ship. And the one poor gentleman was about 250 feet on the fantail. He was on a small boat. He was still laying down his ropes and stuff on the bow of his little small boat. He had a chunk of shrapnel about that long, and it was about 6 inches across on the butt, and it all pointed down to a spear, and it hit him in the hip, smashed his hip and his femur, and he was in pretty bad shape. And I was the other little boy. We were about 19 then, and I got shrapnel in my face because I was assigned to, during general quarters, to shut off the motor generators that supplies power to each gun tub for their electronic sights, and they had to have a 110 AC, where the ship is all DC.
How many surgeries did it take to remove the shrapnel from your face?
Well, just one, basically. I removed all the rest of them with a pair of tweezers and my razor.
Oh. So
Razor would catch the edge of it as it started working out the skin, and then you'd go back with the tweezers and pull it on out.
when your ship was hit, was it a routine firing from the shoreline to your ship, or were you under a certain battle at that time?
Well, Wonsan Harbor, on the north end of it, had a pretty good hill, 2 big hills. And between the crotch of the 2 hills, there's a railroad track going through the mountain, and that was the big cannon. And when you sighted that, you'd go in there and drop shells there. Well, they'd pull back through the mountain on the other side, so it never bothered them. We dumped an awful lot of ammunition up there, but didn't do any damage to them. And that was the gun that chased us out of Wonsan Harbor and hit us in midship, and it cut all the wires off of the mast. Even the guy wire, a great big steel cable, cut that in half. And we lost our radar, our telecommunications, our radios, and our signal lights on our mast. Everything just wiped all the wires off of it.
So when you have that type of disabling on your ship, then what was the protocol? Did you seek harbor somewhere to repair, or do you stay in action?
Well, we were floating. There was no problem with our ship operation, just our communications. And the people on board ship went and got everything running again. So we weren't out of operation hardly at all.
Left you a little vulnerable, though, I would think.
Oh, yeah. There was enough help around if we needed it, like a couple of cruisers and a battleship and an aircraft carrier sitting offshore. Excuse me a minute.
Now, during your time, what was most memorable to you?
Oh, the chow line, naturally.
And why would that be?
Oh, they feed us real good in the Navy, as you can still tell. Excuse me while I take this. They're persistent. Hello. Oh, yeah, Earl. I mean, John. Okay, sir. Thank you very much. It'll probably be around 12 or 1 before I get done here. Okay. Bye, John. My car was in the shop getting fixed, and he says I can go pick it up.
That's good news.
As you finished with the Navy, how did you find yourself with the Washington State National Guard?
That was prior to going into the Navy.
Oh.
If you're in the National Guard and they call you up, you have to go. And they wanted me to go to Korea as an ambulance driver. I'm too stubborn for that. They just use that for target practice. So I went and joined the regular Navy. And the regular Navy, you can get out of the National Guard if you're going into any regular service. So I gladly did that. And I went over to Korea anyway and got blasted.
Other than the chow line, what did you take away for you personally from your service?
Other than the chow line, huh?
Well, the chow line you said was the fun part of it.
Yes, there's lots of fun part of it. Especially when you're going across the pond, the Pacific Ocean. You get out in the middle of it, and they just sink down in the water, about 20 feet.
The ship does?
Mm-hmm. It's a dry dock, landing ship dock, LSD. And it will sink down quite a ways into the water. And naturally the water comes into the well deck. And we go swimming in the well deck, out there in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
Now that would be a sight to see.
It could be. But when we have a man overboard drill, we have a plain old pallet, wooden pallet, and they put up some stabilizing wires to hold the pole straight up in the air, and then we put a piece of screen metal on top of the pole so that the ship can, with radar, can still see the pallet, so they know where it is. And then they send a small boat out to go pick up the pallet for man overboard drill.
Did you participate?
I was the electrician on board the boat, and we chased out there, got the pallet. the ship kept going further, further away until we couldn't see it. So we grabbed the pellet and bring it on board. And the coxswain says to the officer in charge that I have no steerage. I can't steer the boat. Naturally, kind of shocked us that didn't know about it, but there's a emergency tiller on most of the boats, which is directly above the rudder. And they got a little screw knob, the plate they take off, and the big metal tiller goes down and connects just like a socket. And then they can steer the rudder. And that's how we start headed back towards the ship. And we were in about 20-foot swells. You'd come up over the top. Oh, there's the ship. Oh, where'd it go? Then we'd come up to the top of the other one, and we still, oh, there it is, still over that way. And hey, turn a little more to the right.
So you did not have a compass system?
Well, they weren't too reliable. They were just a little teeny thing that ran off the battery, the gyro compass. And we, anyway, navigated back towards the ship. But that was fun to find out you couldn't steer the boat out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
Prior to joining the Navy, had you been a seaman of sorts, living here in Washington? Were you a boatman to begin with?
No, I can't say that I was, but I sure got enough steelheading and salmon fishing after I got back. Yeah.
So something civilians we always wonder about, and it's just a silly little thing. Did you ever fish off your ship?
Oh, definitely.
Could you tell me more about that?
Well, let's see. We were sitting in Wonsan Harbor, and one of the Filipino gentlemen that took care of the wardroom and the officers, he put a drop line over the side back at the stern. And he would check it every once in a while. And one day, hey, something's tugging on it. I got me something here. And he pulled it on up. Here's a great big old red snapper. A red snapper. Good fish and chips. And we didn't get a piece of it.
Oh.
The officers got it, the whole thing. But he couldn't pull it up. It was way too big. He'd tear the hook and bust the line or whatnot. So we used a Jacob's ladder and threw the Jacob's ladder over the side, and he crawled down the Jacob's ladder and put his hand in the gills of that big red snapper, which I would say was between 20 and 30 pounds of fish. And he tried to climb back up. This one arm was incapacitated, and Jacob's ladder's pretty flimsy. So we got about 6 guys, and we pulled the Jacob ladder and him and the fish up the side of the boat. And like I say, we never got a taste of that red snapper.
Now, did you ever have shore leave on any islands during your time at sea?
Well, the first one was Eniwetok, and then there was 2 littler islands, Engebi and Perry. And then in Korea, the only time we got ashore was when the old man pulled into Pusan and scared the living daylights out of him. He come running into the harbor of Pusan, and the subnets were still closed. And I was down in the boiler room, and we got a flank emergency astern. and that just sucks the water right out of the boilers. It sucks all the steam out of them. And he finally got it stopped before he busted the subnets. And then they opened the nets, and then we went on into the rest of the harbor. And it usually takes about 6 bells, we call, every time they change the speed or direction. They give us the annunciator, a bell. Normally it takes about 6 bells for Pusan. Well, the old man cranked up almost 26 bells going on in the rest of the way to the dock. He wasn't shook up. That's how he got his nickname is Shaky Jake.
Then as you left your service with the military and the Navy, where did you go with your life? What was your next step?
Well, seeing that I had to leave high school for the National Guard enactment, I was only a sophomore, so I had to finish my high school. So I went back to school and got my diploma. And that was a requirement. You couldn't get a GED or anything from Washington State because you had to have Washington State history. So I got my credits for Washington State history, and then they gave me my high school diploma. And then I went to work I worked at Channel 9 television station, operating the transmitter for Channel 9 TV and KUOW FM station for the University of Washington for 5.5 years. And in the meantime, at night, I would go down to Boeing's and work in the special test equipment shop for Beaumark. And I spent 42 years at Boeing as a flight test inspector.
I'm sure that had some interesting experiences, a flight test inspector.
Oh, definitely. We would go to a lot of the military bases to do testing on the airplane. And we were up in Montana on one. Then they have a chase plane, an F-80 Saberjet test plane that they'd fly alongside the airplane being tested and verifying the controls and stuff that the pilot need to know about and the condition of the test and whatnot. And as they were coming in at the airport, the chase plane was observing the landing, and he got down almost to the airport, and all of a sudden the jet started climbing off the chase plane, which is normal, except a goose hit the front of the cockpit and broke out all the glass. And you got the pilot in the front, and you got the photographer in the back of this inline cockpit, and the photographer noticed he had blood all over him. Well, naturally, assuming the pilot's blood, he grabbed a hold of the stick and was going to go up and get some altitude so he could jump out. All of a sudden, a nice, meek little voice says, "All right, I got it." That was Jamie Loesch, our test pilot. And that just tore me up when they were telling about it. But the front of that cockpit was just all, that Nisa glass was just all torn all to heck when that goose hit the front of that jet airplane.
Did the pilot, was he able to land the
Oh,
airplane?
definitely, yes.
What a pilot. That is a tribute to him.
Very. Jamie Loesch is a very good pilot. He's had several close scrapes, and I've always admired his ability to handle the airplane. Yeah.
Now I see you have some items here, and I'm aware that you received the Purple Heart. Could you share with us?
No, that's mine. You can't have it. There's a lot of photographs I got here, but this is that's the award you get for sticking your nose out when they're firing on you.
And this was specifically when your ship was hit.
Yeah,
and
over
you
in
were
Korea.
One of the
Yes.
two gentlemen that was injured.
No, that's over in Japan.
Yeah.
They got the museums and stuff over there that took pictures.
These are the photos that you took.
Yes.
Are there any questions that we can't go around?
No.
Okay.
You may ask anything you want.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's such a pleasure to have you join us today. Would you like to share with us your name?
My name is Carolyn Enlow.
And Carolyn, I understand that you are a veteran of the United States Navy.
That's correct.
Could you share with us what unit you were with, where you served, and the timeline?
Let's see. I was with the Navy Nurse Corps. I served with the Navy Nurse Corps for so many years. I was at Bethesda, and then I went to Vietnam, and then I ended up in Bremerton. And once I got to Bremerton and got out, I stayed here, and that's how I got to Washington.
Oh, excellent. Now, how many years were you in Vietnam?
Only one. For the Navy, they only had about 30 places per year on land. And so there was quite a list to get there. We stayed exactly 1 year. I went on my birthday, I came home on my birthday.
Oh, that's quite the birthday
Well, it was
present.
nice. It was nice because that way I can remember when it was.
Yes, there you go. I did not know the Navy had land sites.
Only one. They had one 700-bed Quonset Hut hospital in Da Nang, which was up in the northern area. And it was quite a nice place in terms of, it was very comfortable. It was not MASH-like. You know, people think you were in Vietnam, you were in a Quonset, your MASH hut. We were in a Quonset hut. We wore our white uniforms and our white shoes. We ate in a mess at a table. It was just like being at home so long as you stayed in the hospital area.
So, were there very many nurses assigned to this location?
I told you there's only 30 a year.
30 a year. That would have been a tremendous challenge for a woman in the time period.
No, no challenge to it.
Well,
Just what you got there, you knew what you were there for. You got to remember that when the casualties came in, they would come in maybe 100 at a time. So time went quickly.
and did the casualties come from all over the country?
I'm not sure. I think most of them came from I-Corps.
From I-Corps, I see. So as a Navy nurse, did you service all branches with their injuries, or was it Navy specific that came to your location?
Well, there was actually an Army hospital right down the road, just like MASH, complete with barracks, etc., etc. But no, so they had their own, but we took everybody. We had Vietnamese, and we also had NVA.
Really? Interesting. So what was security like living there?
Oh, now that was fun, but it was very secure. In the daytime, it was like living here. It was only when the evening came that they throw a couple of rockets in or what have you. So, and once you heard them and knew what they were, that wasn't frightening. It was kind of like, the 4th of July. So you automatically rolled under your bed, went back to sleep.
I see. How old were you at this time?
34.
So you were a mature woman
So
already.
Yes.
Do you think that was to your advantage?
Oh,
to
very
be that
definitely.
age?
They didn't have anybody over there at the age of 22 or 23.
Oh, I did not know.
Well,
that.
at least in our group.
And do you feel that you were prepared for the level of emergencies that you dealt with?
My background was in emergency room nursing and operating room nursing, so
Oh.
yes, I was prepared.
Excellent. That's perhaps why you were chosen to go.
I have no idea, but I'm very glad I had the opportunity.
Are you comfortable sharing with us the type of injuries that you treated?
I didn't treat them per se. I can tell you what my job was. The kind of injuries that they had were god awful. And they could be everything from a frag wound to amputation to whatever. But essentially what I did was I was in the triage area. And so the patients would come in by helicopter. And they'd get down, and then they would come into the triage area where they had 12 of the most fabulous corpsmen you ever met, who would descend like they were ants on a hill and get them ready for surgery in 5 minutes or less. And then they could get them through x-ray and get them into our triage area where we were assigning them to the operating rooms in about 10 minutes. And they did a fantastic job. Those guys were something to see.
Really?
And so what we did then was we helped with the assessment, got the stuff if they needed it, and helped place them and kept track of the traffic and kept them moving.
So how many beds did your hospital have?
710.
700, you mentioned that. How many operating rooms? And were they,
They were Quonset huts.
okay, and
They were Quonset huts.
so a Quonset hut meaning
Oh,
similar?
a tin
I-
thing. And let's see, 2 of them were still Quonset huts. One of them was kind of, I remember they're very primitive. In fact, I probably shouldn't tell this, but this is a war zone way back when we first got there. And we were the second or third group of nurses that had gotten there. So it was for 3 years. The operating rooms, he had a commode in the middle of one of them, which they finally took out. I found that very fascinating, totally against anything I'd ever read, but it was there.
But you were in a war zone,
Yeah, I
as you
was in a
said,
war
and
zone.
you do what you
Well,
had to do.
you couldn't miss it in the operating room because they didn't go in and just take out an appendix. When a casualty came through, most of them had multi-area wounds. So you'd have the orthopod, the general surgeon, the neurologist, everybody all working at the same time,
I see.
which was quite, and the average stay for a patient was 24 hours, 24 to 30 hours, because they would stabilize them and then get them on a plane out of there and back to the stateside or Guam or Japan for care.
For further care.
So it was the only groups of patients that we kept, of course, were the medical cases where we knew they were going to go back to duty for malaria and things like that.
So being kept only 24 hours.
24 to 36. Yeah.
And it's a 700-bed hospital. Your turnover was absolutely phenomenal.
Very rapid.
Very rapid.
So you have to say that one of the reasons that we lost fewer people than they did in World War II or Korea, was because we had the helicopters and we had that first fast turnover, and we had the Air Force who did a fantastic job of transporting them back to these other bases. So the care was excellent.
How was that for you emotionally? Such an enormous responsibility and the challenge of the changeover. Just constant.
I'm going to blow your mind because I have to tell you that I had a very good time. It was a great experience, but again, it depends on how you see your world.
Okay.
You know, do you see it in a positive manner, or do you see, for example, I can only remember one casualty. Now, you can talk to other people who will remember 50,000 and tell you exactly what they were, you know, in great detail, but I didn't do that. I can remember when I first got there, a very tired Marine in the airport, leaning against a post, asleep, and he looked like a picture, you know, he's helmet on, rifle here, and obviously totally out of it. But, and I can remember one other fellow who came in, and he was an Afro-American, nice young man. I can still remember his name, and his name is on the wall. And he was in there, and we were all talking and joking, because we would talk with him, of course. And he went in, and he didn't make it because he had too many problems, yeah.
Well, I can't help but think, though, and knowing you a little as I do, your positive attitude reflected upon the soldiers that came through and gave them hope and encouragement.
I don't think so. I think probably if I had any effect, it was with my fellow workers, my corpsmen and my other, because we had a very we took care of each other. Any service person will tell you that this is true, but I can give you some ridiculous examples. One of the things that we did every week, we had Ace of the Week, and all of the Navy corpsmen who were in our area and the doctors were allowed to take, and the nurses took part in this. And what it was is who could swat the most flies that week. So we had a big fly swatter, and we do it, and then we take a picture, and here we'd be like this. And those pictures would go up on the wall. This was the Ace of the Week. Now, that's how you get through.
Yes, you do. You made your own
That's
fun.
how you get through. And then the other thing, of course, is I had a real advantage because there weren't that many women there, and we were treated like queens. They would take us, I mean, I could go to any USO show, which I might have are the raunchiest things I ever saw, but they were designed for men, not for me. But the fellas would just, you know, they treated you like a queen because you reminded them of home. And, you know, and you talk to them and they talk to you, and it was a very positive experience from that point of view.
Very good.
Yeah, and from a professional point of view, I got probably 5 years experience in one.
Oh, I would think
Yeah.
so. I would think so.
Right.
So,
But the other thing, of course, is that the patients themselves were magnificent. Absolutely magnificent. Those young men were something. And the thing is, they would come in, I was used to civilians coming into the ER moaning and carrying on because, of course, things are bad. They would come into the triage area, the troops, and they'd be laughing and joking and teasing each other.
oh,
And come to find out, this is a true phenomena that somebody identified way back. But the reason is that when you come in from being shot in the field, your condition is better. And so you're happy, you're celebrating, and that's what was going on with that joking. Now, once they went through their surgery and the rest of that, then they were just like any other patient, with the exception of one I can remember. Right.
was there a thought that possibly there'd be an opportunity to go home for them when they entered the hospital as part of that joy?
I don't think they even thought that far ahead. I think they
Okay.
were just damn glad to be out of the field
field.
with nobody shooting at them and not up to the mud.
Yeah, okay.
And then they had an exceptional relationship among themselves. They supported each other.
Yes. Have you had the opportunity to travel to Washington DC and see the wall?
Oh, yes, of course.
And also the statue of the three soldiers?
Oh, I love that statue.
Isn't that gorgeous?
Yes, that's
Do you feel that
fantastic.
it represents?
it does a beautiful job.
Excellent.
And the wall is fun.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, not fun, but it's special.
It's very meaningful, isn't it?
It's a nice memorial.
Yes.
And they earned it.
Mhm. You were also in a foreign country.
Mhm.
What was there about Vietnam that stands out in your mind?
Well, as one of the 30 or so women who was in Vietnam, in I Corps in the Navy, I couldn't go anywhere by myself. I did not drive. You were not allowed to. And you were always accompanied. And a very good reason. If one of us went out and got caught, you'd lose 500 Marines trying to save you. So we were limited with that. We had, of course, we had our officers' club and we had our movies. But the country itself was beautiful. The people were lovely. Now, we knew the ones that worked for us. And then I was lucky enough towards the end, for some reason, I pulled this off, I don't know quite how. There was an opportunity to go down and teach at the Catholic school. They wanted someone. So I got permission to go down there one day a week and teach these kids English. You don't think they taught me Vietnamese? No way. But it was really quite interesting because they're very smart. And they really wanted to learn, and they did it the old by rote way. And of course, you walk in with one of us, our schooling, and you start out and you say, "My name is Carolyn," and the next thing you know, everybody in the class is saying, "My name is Carolyn." Well, we ended up with a blackboard, and I would draw a picture, and I'd say, "This is a mother, and this is a father," and we did just fine.
Oh, how
But that only
experience.
lasted about 6 weeks, and then I had to drop it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you got to integrate into
Oh yeah,
the
I got to meet them.
lifestyle.
I got
You
to
did.
see.
Very wonderful.
And of course, Da Nang was a beautiful city. It was the old French capital. Big, wide things. In fact, they told us historically that before the war got really hot, that you used to be the R&R city for both sides. But by the time I got there, that was not true. I got there right after Tet. So within 3-4 months after Tet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Mhm.
Would you do it over again?
Of course. Of course, I would be honored to do it over again.
I'm sure that you were just a huge contribution to your team.
I don't think so. No more than anybody else. The people who really worked really hard were all people taking care of them, but it was the kids. And they were kids, excuse me. You know. I have to tell you my favorite war story, may I?
Yes, please.
Well, for 1 week, they decided that we were going to work 12-hour shifts, and once they did that, then you couldn't just stay in the OR, so we got farmed out. I got farmed out to the neurological unit for 2 days. This didn't last too long. And in came this, and I'll say his name, maybe I won't. In comes this Marine sergeant that I had seen in triage. And he and all his men, they had been fragged, which means somebody threw a grenade into their front door. And they came in and they all went through surgery, and he had all kinds of surgery. And I came on duty and I walked around and I looked over in this bed, and here's this sergeant. 15 tubes coming out here, there, and what have you, and he is doing sit-ups in bed. Well, I almost had a coronary, and I said, "Sergeant Robinson, what are you doing?" "I gotta set an example for my men." Now, if they can do that, certainly anybody else, we can do what we could. They were the ones that did the work. So it was a very positive
That is
experience
an
for me.
Amazing story.
Mhm.
I bet, now I'm going to go there, that you had many a soldier fall in love with you.
No,
No.
no, I hope not. I did have one corpsman who came up to me and said, "I really have a problem, blah, blah, blah." Well, you see, I knew the corpsman because I had taught the corpsman in the OR in Bethesda before I went to Vietnam. And they had to
Oh.
spend 6 months in the field, and then they came in to work in the hospitals. So I knew a lot of these corpsmen who were coming through.
Wonderful.
And this kid he said, I see you in my dream, blah, blah, blah. And I said to him, it's not me you see. You knew me in the States. I remind you of your wife and your daughter, and you want to go home. And we took care of it that way. But that's the only one I ever ran into.
Well, I attribute that to your age and your maturity.
Exactly,
Mhm.
exactly.
So, but you would be very easy to fall in love with.
I
I'm
doubt
sure
that.
there were others that had a crush.
I don't think so, but anyhow.
Well, wonderful. So when you got home, how did you celebrate?
Well, that's interesting. Well, we'd heard all that stuff when I got home. Well, my family greeted me. Well, I landed in California and went to Illinois. The family came, we had a cake. I, gave them the stuff I'd picked up on R&R, and we just celebrated that way, just glad to be home.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And then you went on to Bremerton, Washington, and you served there for a little bit.
Hmm.
How many months were you there?
Well, 69, September 69 until 71, 2 years.
2 years. And you were land hospital, not on the ship?
Yeah, Bremerton is a land
Yes.
hospital. Oh, I did rotate out to the ship. We
Did
traded.
you?
They did have nurses on the 2 hospital ships, so that was 30 more or so on each. And they had a program where they were going to let us rotate, change places. So I changed place with a nurse on the USS Sanctuary, and she came in. Well, I got on that ship, and first of all, you slept in bunks. And the only thing holding you in that bunk was a little teeny tiny tape about that wide. But it didn't make any difference because I would never have survived on that ship. Because if I wasn't working, I was asleep. That thing, I mean, it was awful. It was awful. And fortunately, and unfortunately in a way, I went because I wanted to see Subic Bay, Philippines. However, they had a big offensive that day. We all got called back, so I never made it to the Philippines.
Oh, wow. So was it an adjustment going from a field where there's live action coming into the hospital to being stateside? Was that a big adjustment for
Not
you?
really.
Okay.
And I didn't have problems with the kind of problems. You see, I had such an easy life, and I enjoyed it, truthfully. You know, and I was doing what I wanted to do. I didn't have PTSD or any of that flashback or all that stuff. I can only remember one time when somebody set off a firecracker when I was home for sooner, and I jumped. But other than that, I didn't carry any of that with me. The only complaint I had when I got home was it was too cold at 70 degrees and 90 degrees humidity.
Excellent.
Yeah.
In Bremerton, did any of the soldiers come there that had served in Vietnam?
The way it worked is then when they got through the field hospital and then they went to the main hospital, then they eventually would go to the hospital closest to their home. So yes, there were some.
Okay. Excellent. And what else transpired in Bremerton that you enjoyed?
Oh, well, in the old days, you know, during this time, after all, this is 50 years ago, it used to be that if you were in the service, you had to be 100% service able in order to go on duty. So there were a group of fellas who had what is called a pilonidal cyst, which is a problem where you have an open wound that has to heal by primary intent, which means from the inside out. In other words, these guys would be stuck on the wards for 6 months. One would have been there almost a year. And this is on the Bay type wards, and you know, and I was lucky enough to get that ward because they taught me how to play pinochle.
And you play pinochle to this day.
And I play pinochle to this day.
Excellent.
Yeah.
As you finished Bremerton, where did your career take you next?
To the University of Washington to get a degree.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
And then you stayed there?
Yeah, that's how I got to Washington.
Okay.
We were lucky. We were allowed. We could put in a choice of where we wanted to go. Again, because we were so few there, the medical corps and ourselves, and we discussed it, and as a group, and we decided we'd come here. The area that was the runner-up to it was New England, and I'm glad we came here.
Oh, yes. We're glad you came too. Now, would you have gone to the university on a GI Bill?
No, because originally, this probably is why I didn't have a problem with all this also. When I was very young, I flunked out of the University of Michigan for playing bridge and cutting class. And at that time, I decided I needed to go to school. You all do that when you carried away. So I joined the Army. And I am also an ex-corporal in the U.S. Army Corps, WAC.
Yes, excellent.
And I went to school then and got my first nursing degree on the GI Bill.
Okay.
And then I came back and got a master's at UW.
Excellent. Are there any parting words you'd like to share with us about your life?
Not about my life, but I think you can be very proud of your young people. And you never underestimate them. Because when they're called on, they will come through.
Excellent.
Thank you.